Play different.
Avara is a fully polygonal first-person shooter developed by Yuri Monkey in conjunction with Ambrosia Software, who published it back in 1996. Now, Avara was a big part of my life, and the original version of this video rambled on for far too long, so I'll try to focus on what made this game unique and the reasons it developed a small but devoted cult following. In the game, players control a remote-controlled bipedal robot known as a Hector, which is basically a pair of legs with a head slapped on top. Ambrosia fans will of course recognize the name Hector as a tribute to the company's pet, a grey parrot. Escape Velocity players will also know it as the name of the captain who steals your money if your game is unregistered for too long. And as a cheapskate, I really hated Captain Hector. Anyway, it's this robot, and specifically the way it controls and moves, that makes Avara a unique action game to this day. It will also either make you love or hate the game. While Hectors may not be tanks, they do have tank controls, in that they can only walk forward or backward and turn. This means there is no sidestepping or strafing. Luckily, the mouse controls the head independently from the legs, allowing snappy aiming. This also means you can emulate strafing by walking straight but looking to the left or right, though it's not possible to look further back than about 90 degrees from the front of your machine. There are also 3 different hull sizes, with speed getting sacrificed for weapon space and vice versa, though the majority of players use the speedy light hull. Hectors can also jump, but have to first crouch and bend their legs before they leap up. This is quite possibly the first shooter to have this realistic touch, and to this day very few games have replicated it. Then there are the weapons, but I'll talk more about those later. Okay, so now we know how the thing controls, but what do you actually accomplish with your Hector? Well, for starters, you can play the included solo levels. These begin with simple training areas to help newbies come to grips with handling their machine, but soon players will need to explore, solve puzzles, and battle enemies. The levels are unrelated to each other, and there is no story aside from brief descriptions of each mission. The designs are also average at best, though the variety is impressive. One level may find you escaping a prison cell inside an enemy compound, while another will require the player to free a trapped ship as an onslaught of enemies attack. I had a good time playing through them recently, and I think they're worth playing today if you enjoy slower paced FPS games, but don't expect anything spectacular. There are also user created solo levels, though not many. I have favourites, such as those by Gus Mondo Wiseman, which were inspired by Myst and involved lots of puzzles and exploration. Tyrant made an Indiana Jones style level where players navigate trap-laden ruins, and Roop 1 created Zybrak, which involved quickly infiltrating an enemy base in order to lower a shield for a bombing run. But it's not the solo game that made Avara a cult hit, it was the multiplayer. Avara supported up to 6 players per match. Players could choose their Hector colours, which would also set people up in teams. In a standard game, every player starts with 3 lives, and whoever is the last Hector standing is the winner. This was quite different from other contemporary multiplayer shooters, which mostly had timed battles or would end when someone reached a certain kill count. This made it a slower paced and more deliberate FPS compared to its contemporaries, as lives were much more valuable, and running out blindly would lead to a swift kick in the pants. This is compounded by the movement of the Hectors, which again was much more deliberate than a typical FPS and required a bit more patience to master than Quake or Duke 3D. And players have to balance that movement with the limited specialized weapons. Hectors regenerate shields slowly over time and also have infinite plasma lasers. However, if those lasers run low on energy, the rate of fire becomes akin to squeezing juice out of an orange peel. The machines also carry a limited amount of boosters, which regenerated shields and plasma quickly. There are also grenades, which are lobbed in arcs and explode on collision. Finally, there are missiles, which fly slowly but can lock on and home onto enemies. Don't leave them on your head too long while aiming though, as your snazzy missile hat can be blown up with you beneath it. It's possible to shoot missiles out of the sky if your aim is good enough, and if you fail, you can walk back and forth in a manner where the missile would circle until it blew up. This, of course, would leave you open to attack, so it was better to avoid open spaces and use the level geometry as cover. It's also important not to move predictably, otherwise opponents can easily lob a hail of grenades directly on your little tank head. So one had to do all this maneuvering while simultaneously attacking enemies. As pretentious as it sounds, it felt more like a mix between improvised dance and a battle. A dance battle, if you will. It wasn't just about who could aim and shoot faster, but who had better control of their Hector and the weapons on board, and took better advantage of the surroundings to get the upper hand. Now on to level design. The core mechanics of Avara suit a particular style, where there's a powerful goodie that replenishes all ammo, but it would be in the open and expose the player. As a quick aside, Avara is finished for wide open spaces. Less useful power-ups would be scattered around, also in places that expose players, but gave better options for counterattacks or escape, such as ducking behind cover. There were many variations of this formula, with architecture making levels feel and play completely different despite sharing the same core ideas. But of course, maps weren't restricted to these design concepts, and we saw all sorts of ideas from all sorts of people because of how easy levels were to make. To make a map, all you need is a vector-based drawing program such as ClarisWorks. Then, you draw a rectangle to begin creating a platform. The chosen color will be the polygon's color, and the size of the shape is how wide the platform will be. Then, you write a little bit of script, such as telling the rectangle how tall its 3D representation will be. Then, that text is grouped with the rectangle, and when the level is loaded, it will be shown in 3D as the designer drew and described. Of course, things were a little more complicated than that to make a full-fledged level, but not by much, and despite this simplicity, a lot could be done. Here is just a small example of the kind of levels we saw. There were ball games such as Lion Ball, which was basically basketball but with armed robots, and Dodgeball, where players could only attack by picking up balls of their own colour and launching them at enemies. There were King of the Hill modes and also wrestling levels where weapons didn't hurt players, but rather the aim was to push them off the arena. Levels could also feature low gravity, or change the behaviour of Hectors and weapons, such as making grenades bounce around like they were made out of rubber. People recreated Tic-Tac-Toe, Battleship, Hubert, and Boxin with the engine, and someone even made a giant functional piano. There are also racing levels, Killfests, Capture the Flag, and Fort levels. The most famous of the latter would be Fort Warfare, a fantastic level which would transform into an officially sanctioned Avara spin-off titled Aftershock, but that will have a separate video. Perhaps the most strange Avara level is Who Dat, a level full of boxes where every player is disguised as a box. Simple levels were also popular, such as the Low Gravity Showdown, the aptly named choke point focused Choke, and Baghdad, which was popular for having no architecture, so very easy on the internet connection. I didn't just play this game online though, nor did I only play levels designed for solo play. I actually spent a lot of time loading up levels designed for multiplayer and just explored them on my own terms. This may sound a little sad, and frankly it is, but I loved doing it. I enjoyed the atmosphere of exploring abandoned, colourful battlegrounds. I would admire the architecture and expression of the designer and create my own stories about the environment. It taught me the importance of a sense of place in games, and that sparse visuals can be a good thing as it allows players to fill in the gaps and spark the imagination. This was also the first game I made levels for. I learned a lot about game design which would help me later both as a games journalist and creator. It also taught me all about colour theory. Then, of course, with the friends I made while playing the game, I joined an Avara community which I'm still a part of today. I've met some of them, worked with others, and one member was even another's best man at his wedding. This community helped shape the person I am today, a person I'm proud to be, and frankly, my life would have been worse if I was never a part of it. I even met the girl I had my first quote-unquote serious relationship with on Avara. It ended in disaster, of course, what with us being insecure teenagers living cities apart, but we later became good friends and remained as such today. So, thank you Avara for both the game and the people. I guess I should balance out all this praise with some flaws, but in all honesty, it's hard for me to look at the game objectively. If I had to find complaints, I would say that the game can be clunky at times, and it's possible to get hung up on geometry when hopping around, which can get frustrating, especially when someone has you in their sights. Yuri Monkey had been experimenting with 3D technology ever since he had an Apple II, but he wasn't happy with the results. He tried again on the Macintosh after seeing Hellcats Over the Pacific, and the resulting polygon rendering library he made in 1992 would be part of the basis for Avara. 2 years later at the 1994 Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference, Monkey was hoping to show off the technology he had been working on to a Mac gaming evangelist. They never showed up, but Monkey did end up showing off the tech to Stuart Cheshire, the man behind the classic multiplayer tank game Bolo. Cheshire remarked that he would like to see this technology used in a 3D remake of Bolo. Later he chatted to Christian fans. He was having trouble getting a 3D space shooter working smoothly. Monkey remembered his conversation with Cheshire and wrote a few demos for his library, including a space shooter and another allowing the player to drive around scenery. Fans and Cheshire were both impressed by the demo, but nothing came out of it. That is, until Monkey started to develop the latter stress test further. Monkey loved Atari's Battlezone when he was young, so the first major version of Avara started as a multiplayer tank game. He ended up deciding that the tanks were a bit boring, so took a walking animation he made for university years ago and stuck the tanks on top. He thought it would be fun to let other people work on the project too, and posted about it on comp.sys.mac.games. The founder of Ambrosia Software, Andrew Welsh, saw this post, which is how it ended up being one of their titles. By the time levels for Avara had already been designed, game testers started requesting jumping. Monkey implemented it, breaking many levels and making it hard to design new ones around the mechanic. But everyone, including Monkey, thought it made the game more fun, so jumping stayed. Andrew Welsh loved Bolo, so insisted Avara be played over the internet. Monkey also loved online games, and originally had no plans for single player, but thought that coding internet play rather than just LAN support for Avara would be a nightmare to implement. And he says he was correct, but ended up quite proud with the result, which he says worked quote-unquote pretty well. As an aside, you can find other Bolo influences in the game. The most noticeable example are the pillboxes which players can capture for their team, as in Bolo. Avara was never meant to be a major project, and instead something to quickly finish before moving on to what Monkey considered to be quote-unquote more interesting games. One of these projects was going to be an online Formula 1 racing game where you could build your own car and race against other people. This game never got past the idea stage, mainly because it was to have the ability to buy parts for real money, and Monkey was worried it would become a game about whoever spends the most money winning every race. So basically, he designed what we would call a freemium game today. That said, some of the ideas in Avara, such as Hectors moving at different speeds depending on how much they're carrying, were related to this racing game concept. He also started working on a 2D polygon-based asteroids game, which is where the polygon animation kit used for Avara originated. Avara had what Monkey called an experimental interface. This came about because he was a very strong believer in the Mac GUI and Apple's user interface guidelines. He wanted to show you that you could make a game using Windows and fairly standard UI components. The keyboard editor was his take on what the UI for a game should look like. A UI where you can see at a glance where the functions are and what they do, and also easily change them using the mouse. He does believe he went a little too far with it, in that some people couldn't figure out how to start a game, but nevertheless, He remains proud of it to this day, but sadly few people took notice, and most people continue to use dated UI concepts. Avara was not a financial success, and at the time, it was Ambrosia's lowest selling game next to Chiral. No one is exactly sure why it failed. Some suspect it's because the registration fee wasn't enforced. Others think that the game may have appeared too dated when compared to other first-person shooters at the time. But despite the commercial failure, Monkey is still very proud of it, especially the tech that went into it. After all, making a multiplayer action game isn't easy, and was much harder back in 1996. But it's the key layout editor which he is still most proud of, as he felt it was truly innovative. Monkey was also very proud of the game's sound system he wrote, so much so that he campaigned Apple to adopt it, as he felt it was far better than the APIs they offered at the time, especially ones that supported 3D sound. Unsurprisingly, Apple wasn't interested in listening, or perhaps they couldn't hear because they were using their own inferior sound system. Heyo! As far as the graphics go, Monkey says he can't take credit as he just tried to copy what Parasoft Interactive did with Hellcats over the Pacific. But he is proud that his version of the system supported Apple's region-based clipping, which was no easy feat. Monkey didn't play Avara online much after it was released. One reason was that he was simply burned out on the game after working on it non-stop for almost 2 years, and he was ready to move on. Additionally, he says he's introverted and shy, but also didn't want to hide his identity in the game, and ended up not liking the attention he received by being the creator. The final nail in the coffin was that he moved to an ISP with speeds which made the game pretty much unplayable. Another reason is that Monkey just sees the things that he feels could be changed or improved. One example are the single-player missions, which he was too busy to take care of himself. He originally wanted a campaign similar to what space sims such as X-Wing and TIE Fighter offered, and wasn't happy with how puzzle and exploration-focused the levels ended up being, and also that there was no story or theme tying them all together. In the end, only the level called Rescue, which he designed, remains close to the more action-oriented direction he wanted the levels to go. He also wished the game handled polygons better so that more of them could fit on the screen without slowing the game down. That said, he's still proud of how well it ended up running and the optimizations he had already done, even if Andrew Welsh made a level that brought the engine to its knees every single time Monkey implemented an improvement. As for using ClarisWorks or similar as a level editor, this came about simply because Monkey felt he didn't have the resources to write custom tools for it. He also lost motivation to do so when he saw that the existing editing method worked fine and people were happy with it, so didn't end up writing anything better. Before I conclude this video, I'd like to thank Scarlet Swordfish for supplying the multiplayer footage. It's from a 20th anniversary stream he hosted, and I'll link to the full video below. And that is Avara, a game which remains unique to this day, and one that played an important role in my life.